So we're going to just quickly continue this conversation about who benefits from assistive technology, but also who are we talking about. So Annamarie, would you like to just quickly extend on who are we talking about more widely across society as people with extra requirements?
Yeah, and first of all, I'd like to thank Marius for providing that stimulus to really get us thinking about who we are talking about in the classroom, because I would say we're really talking about a universal approach. We're talking about every classroom, every school environment being set up to be as inclusive as possible through the use of not just additional assistive technology, but unlocking the accessibility features that are already routinely there in every piece of software that exists. And they are there. It's not about additional purchase, it's not about new investment, it's about understanding enough about how the tech works. And this is just routinely not known. Classroom, an even better place to be. So the data is important, as are the stories, and to convince somebody to really want to engage with CPD and training and more information on how to unlock the technologies, you do need some data and a good story. And there's some unpublished data, and I have to say it's unpublished because it's coming very soon.
We're moving to kind of a sense of digital self-ID. That's honestly where we're going on this. So for instance, if anybody's deaf, hard of hearing in this audience, there are no captions. Now we can complain all we like and make certain riders in terms of we want captions to be here on every meeting that we go into. But there are simply not enough human stenographers to give captions in every meeting, every event globally. In PowerPoint you've got captions turned on, but do we really rely on good audio being fed in? Did I prep the AV team before I got here? Or do I say to anybody who's deaf or hard of hearing in this audience that if you download Microsoft Group Transcribe on your phone, this whole thing can be transcribed for you? And if you don't know that as somebody who's deaf, hard of hearing, that's the problem. Yeah? We've got to look at the digital skills and the ability of people with disabilities to digitally self-ID, recognize that they're being left out in certain scenarios. No matter how much accessibility you put into your classrooms, they're going to go to work, they're going to go to Scouts, they're going to go to everywhere else in society and go, this doesn't work for me, and we need to build their confidence. And because it's a much larger audience, this helps us pivot to the question of how. I say I've worked in the field of special AT for all my career, but we are now reaching diversity and inclusion specialists, HR people, general IT people to have this conversation about assistive technology. So I'd just like to talk now, Marius, about how do we educate what is a much larger audience on the role that technology is going to play for their routine empowerment.
There is a place for a number of initiatives at the same time. The first thing is to work directly with business. Microlink does this. Workplace accessibility, raising the bar, but also informing as to what's there. There is also a role for the educators, so that through nasen, teachers are aware of these tools, they make the tools available to the young people are then able to select the tools independently in school and beyond school. That includes their parents. There was a wonderful story within our AT Pilot that we've done with nasen, where equipping a young person, I think it was in year 9, who was dyslexic, with the, if you like, the Microsoft playbook, has hit their parents who are also dyslexic, their uncle and their auntie who's also dyslexic, and suddenly the mushroom cloud goes.
They missed the technology at school, right?
They completely missed it, yeah. The third way I would say is to tell stories, like Joanna. Stories that get into the minds of people in a way. We've had an oral tradition going back 6,000 years of human history. If we tell stories that resonate with people, they're more likely to listen and go, you know what? I didn't know that. Show and tell, show and tell, is still one of the most powerful CPD tools you could possibly have.
I think we need a mixture of the data and the stories. Yeah. So it's just about academic attainment, it's about life skills, it's about relationships, and increasingly having the skills to be able to engage with technology supports all of that. And we're talking really about skills for life and skills into adulthood, and ensuring that our population and children of today are truly the workforce for tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I love stories. So here's one fresh from the AT Pilot. A young lady, 12 weeks away from her A-level exams, grade 8 on 3 different musical instruments. She's been turned away from 3 conservatoires because they didn't feel she learnt quickly enough. 12 weeks ago, she was diagnosed as profoundly dyslexic. She got through to her A-levels and grade 8 on 3 musical instruments by not even realising that she had these barriers. The teachers were saying things like, well, she's a little lazy and maybe doesn't complete her written work on time. That's the why. That's the why in a nutshell.
It sums it up a bit, Marius, doesn't it? This is the week that we are all, it's one of those awareness weeks in terms of neurodiversity. We're really hearing about a young person who's a real high achiever, and because of that high level of achievement, didn't have their needs identified at an earlier stage.
So just to wrap up then, what we know as Microsoft is we've put accessibility and disability inclusion as one of our key pillars within our CSR responsibility. But also we're seeing it as so much more than that. This is actually, if we are technologists, if any of you are from technology businesses, I'm the Government Disability and Access Ambassador. So the government has said the tech sector has to dig into disability. When we build technology, we can design it with people with disabilities in mind or without people with disabilities in mind. But what I also want to share with you is that when we as Microsoft go out, we talk to all the governments around the world, all of the major businesses, all the major employers. We employ over 500,000 people in the UK through the technology sector as Microsoft. And we're trying to make disability inclusion an absolute, a deliverable, part of what we do, like a table stakes deliverable. This is not just about D&I, this is not just about the right thing to do, this is the sensible thing to do in terms of building infrastructure that is supportive. But my anecdote, just to wrap to my final anecdote, I was working with a city bank about 2 years ago, just before lockdown, and we did an amazing session on inclusive technology. Trust me, employers want this information. They want their employees to self-accommodate, to self-learn, to make their adjustments and take their training in their way. They want to do this. But a young lady, mid-20s, with dyslexia, came up to me and she said, I only got this software at school, I didn't know it was available at work. That's just the wrong way around, isn't it? Come on, people. We cannot say that the journey stops with technology when we leave school and go to work. We've got to get kids, students, to feel positive about their long-term inquisitiveness around how they adapt and how they use their technology. Investing in kind of recognising that it's okay to ask, but we've got to keep up. You know, there are many people who left school who did not know these tools existed.
Can I just plug for, if you're sitting here thinking, how can I find out more? Microsoft generously worked with nasen to develop a how-to guide for the classroom, and that is available through, if you go onto the nasen website, sign up to our membership, which costs nothing. This is not a sales pitch, nothing costs. Then you can access that how-to guide, and it's got loads of tips and techniques for how to access what you already have at your fingertips. It's not about anything extra that you have to do.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to stay for questions, but I don't know how the organisers are feeling. Should we take one question from the floor? Is that okay? I'm taking one question from the floor.
More people are left out of school because of hearing issues and vision issues.
Yep.
80% of hearing loss occurs after birth, yet people in Europe are tested at birth only, but not in preschool. What is Microsoft doing to test people's hearing and giving them assistive technology to help them go to school?
Okay, does everybody get it? Take a moment. Well, testing hearing, not directly. There's some interesting work being done in our innovation labs around the world on Windows connectivity for hearing aid users and how we then self-adapt the technology. I'm not going to say any more than that at this stage. On hearing all up, one thing I would just say is that there's something incumbent upon certainly people who benefit from text and captioning to really invest in this space. The deaf community used to call auto-captioning fractions with an R in the middle, as in automated captioning is just nowhere ever going to be as good as a human captioner. We are now getting to the point where human captioning in multiple languages is really getting to a level where it's incredible. Already on the insiders versions of Windows, if anybody is truly geeky and wants to get on the latest insider build, you have offline captioning anywhere in Windows, meaning any content becomes captionable, regardless of whether it's being made accessible or whether you're joining through Teams or whatever it might be. So we're continuously improving the auto-captioning side. Testing hearing tends to be coming through our partner organisations. I think to keep in touch with you and maybe see if I can find anything out there on the innovation side. Okay.
Inclusion and inclusion for all completely underpins the why, but it's about making sure that all children, all young people can achieve the best possible outcomes and can have choices, options, routes into employment and into adult life, and that starts right in the earliest years.
We're entering youth justice pathways, in other words, juvenile crime. Over 70% of young people entering youth justice pathways have a degree of special educational need.
But Marius, they haven't been identified quite often because in some of the work that we do, we know that the older young people coming out of the justice system have needs, but they've never been identified, they've never been supported. They are identified as young people with challenging behaviour. They were usually part of the cohort who were excluded from school, and then later on in their young adult life, we're able to identify that they have dyslexia, dyspraxia, ADHD.
I'm just smiling to myself because those that know me in the audience know that I'm normally the person that never shuts up on stage. This is brilliant. I love the fact that I'm barely getting a word in edgeways. I really want to talk about this concept of identification. As we extend this conversation into the workplace, one of the biggest challenges we have across employers globally is the concept of ID within any number of characteristics. And this concept of self-ID and disability is really starting to resonate. If you think about disabled children who become adults, move into the workplace, what possible motivation might there be to identify a disability? To whose benefit am I identifying my disability? And there's a super interesting piece here about how this recognition from Microsoft is now feeding into the design principles of assistive technology. Just a very simple example. If you need, if you're a teacher and you have never checked a document for accessibility, this is your call to action. In the review tab of any Office solution, whether it's an email, a PowerPoint document, or a Word document, you can check for accessibility. And what does that mean? Colour contrast, labels on images for students who are blind. You can check accessibility. But in years gone by, it was file, inspect document, check for accessibility if you had the motivation to check. Our product teams have been on a journey of understanding around disability. That has now moved next to the spell checker, so it's next to review, it's been given that position. We now have live checking, and if you try to lock a Word document into a PDF and it's not accessible, there are accessibility errors in that, we will flag you and say, are you sure you want to save this? Because you're about to lock in a whole ton of inaccessibility that will lock people out. In summary, that is discoverability of accessibility. We recognise that this audience is way larger than the 1 in 6. We're actually starting with the advent of mental health conversations, neurodiversity, learning difference. We're now starting to talk about 1 in 4 more globally on the topic of disability that need a different way of working.
You're absolutely right. Can I cite a piece of research?
Hiding loss of hearing, they're not sharing that with us. There are parents with these disabilities that are not sharing us. So this should be seen as an all-up digital skill. You know, accessibility is a digital skill. We've got to be doing it. Just so you know, I'm working with the DWP with 26,000 work coaches, so that people who are looking for work are getting this advice from 26,000 generalist work coaches. They're not going to the specialist services. We want people with disabilities to actually just say, have a conversation with their work coach and be told, as the immersive reader, you can dictate here, you can magnify, you can do all of this on modern technology, and I'm here to help you do this. So I think there's that analogy that we need to look at, that wider group of stakeholders. I guess that leads to the wrap-up, which is, does that change the reason why we're doing disability inclusion and accessibility?
Is there a wider message that we can share with society as to why we...
Mentioned communication. That's my background. I mean, that's like I spent all my career. One thing I think is super interesting that we did is that if you go into the immersive reader, the PCS symbols that are used commonly on AAC are there because we recognised that actually Microsoft had a role to play in normalising or destigmatising the use of symbols. I mean, I think that was an amazing step, and actually others have followed since. So any website in the world or any document that you're accessing through Microsoft products, you can get symbol support built into it. In terms of providing the communication aids, we're not in that game as yet. What we are obviously doing is we're supporting the infrastructure that supports augmented communication. So things like text-to-speech. If you listen to the voices now that are available in Edge, they are not the old robotic voices that you might have been used to listening to. So we're seeing voice banking, loads of great work being done in the neural TTS speech engines and things. It's really starting to come out. But Microsoft's job should always be platform provider. We should be making it easier for others to make specific technologies. I totally agree when it comes to our products, Office, Word, Windows. We have to build in the accessibility and the innovation in that space, but we shouldn't be reaching into other people's product space, specifically. Does that make sense?